Okay, thank you for joining us for the North Precinct Advisory Council. I am happy to be here for February. If you believe a rodent back in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, I guess we're going to have spring very soon. I'm sure that's really relevant to the Pacific Northwest. But in any case, we're happy you're here. And tonight we are happy to welcome Amy Smith, who is going to speak to us for about the next half hour. She's acting chief. She is with the care team. And I am just going to go ahead and stop right there. Let her tell us more about herself. I have just made you a co-host. And as I'm making her co-host, I do want to also make sure I thank once again the University Masonic Lodge for their generous donation of the Zoom license, which we so appreciate, so that we can all meet here. So with that, Amy, you are on board. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I will not talk for a half hour because I am very tired of the sound of my voice today. And also I find that generally people have a lot of questions. And the more useful thing to do is to give an overview and then to just convene the conversation. So I often open meetings saying, you cannot offend me, you will not offend me. And that is true. It is true. I really would like to surface any concerns and any questions. So I am Amy Smith. I arrived in this role almost a year ago. I like to lead with I'm career nonprofit. I've worked primarily in child welfare and mental health provision for kids, foster care, those types of issues my whole career. So I'm 27 years in. I also like to say that I was in Seattle in the Central District, but then I left in 2016. I was in the Midwest until 2022. And that's important because as it relates to public safety, to police, to city council and elected officials, I didn't know anything. I was gone. And so, I was aware of some of the national movement around justice and public safety, mental health provision, those concerns, but I didn't know what it felt like to be in Seattle during that time. I came back because I raised 4 kids. The older 2 graduated college and moved back to Seattle, and then my younger 2 are in undergrad on the West Coast. And so when they came back, I was like, okay. And so I got to come back to town. I was working for Providence in population health and traveling. I had just finished a terminal degree that was very anchored in data science. I was a behavioral health researcher, kind of on the side of my career. And I had done doctoral work that focused on, I partnered with the federal government to look at military branches, Homeland Security, things like that, and figure out how do you drive a learning culture in the context of a militaristic organization. So you would probably recognize that, on the front lines of service, generally to challenge a decision or disagree, make a suggestion, that could be considered insubordination. And so what is that line where you have, where you can be directive and you have strong protocols and policies, but you're also emboldening people on the front lines to question, to debate, and especially to make recommendations, because we know that folks that are the closest to the front lines of the work generally understand the problems very well and often the solutions. And so I don't know if I manifested this job or what. It was a fascinating time in my life. And when I came back to Seattle, I knew Monisha Harrell. I had had a conversation with Bruce about a different job. And he got it in his mind that I should work for his administration in some way. And I thought that was very funny because I do not care for politics at all. It never occurred to me that I would work in the public sector. But one day I got a call about this job in 911, and they explained to me, it was Monisha, she explained how 911 had been taken out of police, that it really lacked business supports. It wasn't set up and organized to be a department yet. And also that council had designed this old pilot that was called dual dispatch. And I recognized that looked like, sort of the alternative response trend that was emerging nationally. I was aware of that. And so I thought about it a little bit. And, I've shared before publicly that my older son was like, well, Mom, you're probably not going to make things worse. You could go give it a try. And so I did. I accepted the role. And right out of the gate, I was just obsessed with the work. I mean, I live in Lower Queen Anne, a half mile from the West Precinct. And for the first time, I'm an empty nester. I don't even have a house plant. And so I'm spending all of my days, all of my awake hours in 911 primarily, and was just really fascinated with the idea that you could use 911 as the data hub, rather than conceptualizing it as like a little customer service center or something, to really understand this is the first response, and everything you want to know about how a community is doing, where the confusion lies, what public sentiment is, how first responders are showing up. You have a unique line of sight when you sit in that call center. And then my instinct right out of the gate, I talk about Bill Schreier as my first teacher, which he was. And day one, hour one, he flipped over my agenda and started articulating for me what responder teams were in the field, and what primary responder teams, and then what secondary responder teams. He described King County Mobile Crisis Team to me, the CSOs, police CRT. He just enumerated, and the man has a mind like a trap, this we know, because his numbers were very accurate. And by the end of that, I'm very optimistic, and I was very naive. I thought, oh, so I guess Seattle, they want an objective 911 so they can dispatch different things. And they're trying to drive a swifter response, a swifter dispatch. That's why there's a pilot. And I had no idea, and I'm so glad I didn't. I didn't know anything really about defund. I didn't understand the motivation, removing 911. And I intentionally didn't take the time to figure out any political context. I have been very disciplined. I like to have firsthand observation. I like to form my opinions based on what I am seeing, because I know people change also, and it's better to just meet issues and people where they are in that moment. So I was pretty disciplined about that. By the time I presented to council, I had traveled a lot. Because I'm an academic, I went right into the academic hub, Georgetown, NYU, University of Chicago Health Lab, the people who are really working in this space of innovation in 911 and then alternatives to policing, trying to gut check, do we know anything yet? Are there outcomes yet? Is there anything, documented? Is there a blueprint? And what I learned quickly was, nope, there's not. We know Kahoot started in 1989 in Eugene. We know that a social worker hasn't been shot. There at the time there were 60 pilots. Now there's about 75 nationally. And so it emboldened me to not worry too much about a blueprint, but just to anchor in the data, to look at the calls coming into 911. There's more than 800,000, close to 900,000, depending on, if you're looking at non-emergency. And to just start to do a simple sorting exercise. Is police required? Is fire required? Is medical transport required? What types of calls would actually alleviate the burden from police? And I did go in week one. I went right over to East Precinct. I knew Assistant Chief Nelson at the time. He was like a lieutenant. He got promoted every month, it felt like, rightfully so. And I knew he was the first co-responder. So I went over to East Precinct first. I talked to Sergeant Wicker and to the mental health professionals working with police. And I have great affection and gratitude to that team and to everyone at police, because they should have hated me. I didn't know that. But they should have really resented what I was doing. But instead, I sincerely said, what will help? I know you have staffing shortages. I know we can't get to these calls. Is it true that you don't want to go to person down calls? Would that be useful? And I started to test that, across patrol at different precincts, and people validated it for me. And SPD was amazing to me across the board, right from go. Command was wonderful to me. Patrol was. I went on a lot of ride-alongs. And then on the fire side, I was really interested in mobile integrated health. John Ehrenfeld, Health One, Health 99. Because the way I was thinking about it was, we've got this crisis continuum. We've got medical stuff over here, and maybe criminal concerns over here. What's the stuff in the middle? And how do I make sure that everybody's working together in concert? How do we coordinate? So I presented to council the first time in June. The first thing I said was that I acknowledge the excellence in first response at police and at fire. People thought I was being courageous. I wasn't. I was ignorant. I didn't know who I was talking to, and that was my experience. And so I acknowledged it. And then, intentionally made sure that this was not a political question. It's not a philosophical question. It's a utilitarian question. I have to send people to these calls. Who will I send? And so it went well after that. You know, I learned a new layer of complexity like every month. I didn't understand the role of labor in this city, how significant it was. As fast as I realized that nobody had talked to Mike Solon about body of work concerns, there's actually 4 unions that I'm affecting directly. I've got a dispatchers guild as well in 911. So very quickly, you know, I just sat down in front of folks and acknowledged that. And I apologized and said, had I been here, I would have gone to you first. I recognize that this has been your body of work. But what I'm hearing from officers is this. And so I think that that candor and sincerity was effective. And I got the MOU with SPOG pretty easily. I like Mike Solon. We've done business together, and, you know, Kenny at Fire. And so the first team was designed. So I've got 6 mental health professionals. They go out of the municipal tower. They're downtown right now, just in the downtown activation plan zone. They go in teams of 2 in their civilian vehicle, and they start at 11 in the morning and they run until 11 at night, 12-hour shifts. And I designed it that way because the crisis tends to escalate in the evening hours, especially after case managers leave. And also, I recognize nobody else is in the field anymore. You know, Health One, police co-response, everybody else basically is operating during business hours. And there's not coverage in the later evening when we really need it. So it has gone well. They were out. We did a big press conference launch in October, and they started to go out in a kind of a secondary response mode. You know, police would go first and then call on the care team like they had called on CSOs. And then, you know, the MOU, when it became finalized and formalized, then we started doing the dual dispatch model, which just suggests, okay, we're typing it 911. This is good for the care team. It's usually person down concerns. And then we're on police channels. So police go out at the same time. Sometimes if it's a high utilizer, police on air will just say, take it. We know this person. There's no safety concern here. Just take it. Another thing that's happened is as we get flagged down, the care team, often they're very recognizable to police, especially in West. And they'll just say, hey, you know, I mean, the joke is that the logo looks like this, looks like hands holding Seattle, kind of looks like the Sonics logo. And so the police sometimes they'll go like, care team, like, come over. And they'll come over to assist. So it was actually just featured while I was presenting. I got notes that we were on Como today at 4 and will be featured again at 11. Joel Moreno did a good piece talking about the leading indicators of success. We've responded to 250 calls, which represents, when you think about police time alleviated, it's probably close to 1,000 hours that we have given back to police, because very often I've got really good data every week. And as I predicted, often our folks need to be connecting someone to services, talking to them, transporting them for more than an hour. Some calls have required 2 or 3 hours. And police on average, I mean, they are there minutes. It really is a formality. I think it's a good safety mechanism, but generally they really do just roll up and, you know, you good, you're good here, yes, and off they go. They've been called back by the care team 3 times, but not once for a safety concern. All 3 times it was because we needed a referral to the navigation center, for example. There was some function that police needed to play. And so with all of those many words, I'm going to pause and ask what questions you have, because I find that there are many. Oh, there's a chat box. Okay. I like, will this be recorded? Yeah, you can watch it back at half speed. Actually taking what I'm saying. Is care under a part from SPD? Great. So the care department is a 3rd public safety department. It is nationally really significant what we've done. I know this because I get calls from all over the place all the time. I was talking to Broward County, Florida yesterday. There have been little pilots, you know, alternative response pilots, but generally they sit with fire or they sit with police. What the mayor has done, and this is why he calls me chief, I didn't really understand why, you know, that was such a big issue, but it's because his vision was, you have fire, you have care, you have police, and I want a new first responder unit. You know, I want to be able to have civilian response to 911 calls as it's appropriate. And he was correct that the data nationally in little towns and in big cities indicates, you know, a lot of these calls, they just don't have anything to do with those particular professions. And because I'm in crime data every day, I am at police headquarters every day. And I understand, criminal activity is not getting better. The trend data is not good right now, and we really need to free officers up to get to those high priority calls, 1 and 2. Um, Coordination with SPD. Oh yeah. Yeah, the CSOs. So that was one of the major mistakes I made last year is I wasn't aware of the CSOs. Again, Bill had said that's a thing, but I didn't understand their body of work. I had no idea what they did or who they were. And had I understood, I would have gone to them week 1, just the same way I went to these other co-response teams. They were mad, at a certain point. And when I sat down with them, I remember canceling an afternoon, all the meetings and just running over to headquarters to sit down with them and figure out what was going on. And their frustration was, they were organized basically in 2018, this modern version. They had asked for training and support and to have their jobs articulated. They're great professionals. In fact, 2 of my care team members were CSOs and came over. But they just were overlooked. And I've learned from police command that the main challenge was SPOG, that, they didn't have the bandwidth basically, or I think probably the vision to negotiate with SPOG. This is what the CSOs do, because that's a totally different union. And this is what police do. And so rather than go down that path and do what I did, they just kept it real hazy, really vague. The community service officers, do things to support the community and support police. And, I've been very loud and chirpy about that the last quarter of the year, because they deserve the dignity of, clear reason for being. I've got hundreds of call types in 911. And so I've worked really closely with them the last couple months. Lieutenant James and then Jennifer, the supervisors there to say, what do you like to do? Because they're different types of professionals. Some of them really do like crisis response work. Some, I think prefer the community building. Some like the police light work, some of the paper calls and things like that. And so I'm saying, like, there is way too much work to go around. And I'm just trying to design us as a team. They're doing currently, we know, one thing I was able to give them, because it's at 911, is juvenile runaways, like juvenile work. That's not really anybody's body of work, and they're really good at it. Can a determination diagnosis made by the crisis response team be overturned? Yeah, we're not diagnosing. This is not diagnostic work. It's just triage. It's just the same type of work that police and fire are doing. And it's really important for HIPAA considerations and just professional clinical considerations. We do not diagnose, so we've got records. We're using Mark 43. We've got our own instance in the RMS, and it's just what's observable. We're documenting. If somebody has self-reported something, we can say, it's just like 911 narrative. This is what we heard. This is what we observed. This is the service we connected the person to. It's all different. I think the variety of need, it's so vast. And so even when I talk about call types, it really doesn't demonstrate the reality out there of how many types of transports we do, how many needs there are. There's one story that happened recently that I've shared where a woman was evicted. She was elderly. She had lived in the same place for decades and decades. She had lost her husband. She was evicted. She's out on the curb. All of her things are there, right? She's probably grief-stricken and devastated and won't move. She doesn't want to leave her things. Her whole life is there. And for those of us who have experienced profound grief, this story really impacted me, because you realize I don't think she had a clinical diagnosis or anything like that. I think she was devastated and confused and scared, and it was 28 degrees, and we needed to get her indoors. And the care team, it was Abdi, is one of the responders. He's Somalian. He's warm and patient and gracious and very wise. And these two, they spent 3 hours talking this woman into shelter, identifying what things she needed with her to feel okay and what things she could bear to walk away from. And so it's funny because it's hard to explain that in the press, how significant that is in that moment, how much it matters, but it does. And I could see in the narrative what they were saying is like, just take one more step, we're just going to do this one step at a time. And 3 hours later, she was into shelter. And then they, worked with a social worker to try to figure out who was really going to help her navigate the next weeks. Okay, going back to my questions. The unit's greatest need right now. Yes, Katie. So there's the department is organized to house 911, and that is always going to be my primary priority. It is the data hub of the city. It has been woefully neglected forever, and that's a national issue. These are first responders. They're not considered first responders at a federal level. Washington State has said they are, but they're not really provided anything. I mean, imagine the stress and the trauma, of that kind of work. They've had staffing shortages, so mandatory overtime. It is exhausting. And it's specifically psychologically challenging. You never know the end of the story. You really don't. If you do, something was tragic. 2 days ago, as I was driving in, I'm always on the radio, and I knew that somebody had cut glass, was threatening suicide. And then by the time I pulled into the lot at West Precinct, the person had jumped. And I went straight into that dispatcher to talk to him. And he's, kind of a tough young man. He's very experienced, very seasoned. And he was, definitely on the verge of tears. It's just devastating work. Especially when people, are known. Often we know what's going to happen. We know the person's going to overdose. And so that is my primary emphasis, is getting staffing up there and really strong retention strategies, working with the guild to redesign that work, to have more flexibility, just to have more peer support. I just threw the first holiday parties. I guess they've never done that in the history of Seattle 911. And they hadn't done it because we have different shifts, we run 24/7. I was like, have different parties. I'll go to all the parties. So we did. We had like a 10 a.m. party and a night party, and it was really meaningful. It's a simple thing, but so that's a priority area. And then what I'm asking is, I'm meeting with the council, and I'll present to them next week. My preference, rather than adding more staff and more responders, is just to organize what's in existence. Figure out, if I've got 20 CSOs, it should be 24. Can I dispatch them? What can I dispatch them to? We have a unified care team. There's public safety. This type of function is all over city government. Even if you think about, like, the libraries have crisis responders basically at the library. So the mayor's office, the city auditor's office, they are working on that, trying to figure out what all we have. And I just want to organize it first and make sure that everybody who's in existence feels supported, that we know each other, we're speaking the same language, we have common core crisis training. When I arrived, Health One didn't know police co-response, which is the wildest thing, because they're all best friends. They're really similar units doing similar work. So those are my priorities. I would like to grow. I want to be in all 7 districts by the end of the year. That is really important. What I would like to do is analyze, again, where the sort of the crisis hotspots are. I'm looking at the Morrison right now, for example, because I know that last year I dispatched police 185 times just to that one site. And I know that 25% of those were crisis calls. And so what are they? And is there something I can do to prevent some of those calls, or to sort of bolster the environment so that people are better equipped to de-escalate, things like that? Okay, that is true that I'm going to the Fremont Rotary Club. I forgot about that, but that's true. Publicized department's role. Oh yeah, the documentary, that's a good idea, Garrett. Yeah, there's a ton of press. I mean, it's really, it caught me off guard. I am much more introverted than people realize. And I really thought that I was going to come back to Seattle and be like a quiet professor. And so it was really odd. The first time I presented to council, to all of a sudden have all these media requests, I didn't understand how much interest there would be. So I'm trying to always take every interview. I'll talk to anyone who asks, because I know that we want to get the word out. I think it's a hopeful innovation in the city. It's good for, I think, business, the business community.
We back up a bit. If you scroll up, we missed a couple.
That's good. That's a good sign, I think. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Hey, I said nice things about Bill not knowing he was here. Hi, Bill. Coordination with SPD. I did that one. Yes. all the coordination.
Does the team on the ground have paratransport capabilities to transport wheelchair bound? I think that's
Yes.
next.
Yep. Yeah. Yes, that's a great, yeah, thank you for helping me with the questions. Yeah, we do. So currently we have, we basically have temporary vehicles that have just been repurposed from other teams. So we've got like an Explorer and Expedition type thing, but we have a van that could be used almost as a warming center that has a wheelchair lift. That's actually, I think 2 have been ordered because that is an urgent need. I mean, that was an interesting month last year where I just started to analyze transport, who has what, and what are we lacking. And I've been very assertive that that is nobody's body of work, transport, that everybody needs to be able to do that. And I think there's agreement about that. New city council members support the care approach. Oh yes. So again, I think I was being exploited a little bit in ways I didn't understand. To try to ensure that, you know, the new council, that anybody that got elected understood that you cannot design care instead of investing in fire and police. That is not a thing. It is not a thing by the data. It is not a thing. And I mean, anytime you hear me speak, I lead with that. There's the best example of success we have in this country for this type of response is in Albuquerque. Albuquerque started with 6, just like me. The budget was $1.5 million. Mariella, who runs that program, has become a really good friend. And I've been down there several times and we're at conferences together. She started with fire because, again, it was in the wake of defund. But then they set up, you know, a third public safety department. It doesn't have 911, but it's Albuquerque Community Safety. And she started to realize, you know, again, they had police staffing shortages as well, and their call types kept expanding. So she expanded, you know, then to 12 call types and 18 call types, all sorts of things, noise complaints. There's lots of things. Even if you think about traffic incidents where there's nothing criminal about it, right? Somebody just needs to take a report. So as she expanded, she became really close with Chief Medina is his name. And they are, boy, I mean, I am like a shrinking little violet compared to this leader. She is outstanding, and so is he. They present together all the time, and they have been insistent that you cannot let council or politicians divide you ever. It's the only way it works. She now has like care team type people. She has 138, and it's amazing. I just saw them present at Major City Chiefs, and they presented the crime data, police staffing, police morale, and then ACF staffing, ACS morale. It is fascinating what's happened there. At the community safety department actually now is sort of a pipeline for police staffing, which is fascinating. Some people, you know, join her team and then they realize that, oh, law enforcement's great, actually. I'm good at this work. I'm good at this type of response, and they move over. And I did the same thing she did. I insisted that these new positions are first responders and level set the pay. And that was the only thing I really argued about fiercely last year, because the city thought like, no, they're social workers. We don't value them, you know. And I was just insistent that it is the rigors of the job, the requirements are the same. Of course, there's still risk. It's exhausting. There's liability concerns. And I was successful. I mean, the mayor's office had to throw some weight behind me, but I was successful. And it's really significant that those positions are legislated that way so that we can grow in a similar direction. But Adrian and I talk every day, and he knows I will not let them take $1 from police and put it in my department. We are not doing that. Because I live and work in this community. I love this city, and I need police. I mean, even 1,400, honestly, I don't think that was ever an appropriate number. It would have been greater than that. I mean, Boston has 2,800, right? 2,100 sworn and 100,000 fewer citizens. So anyhow, sorry.
So I think we can just do a couple more questions. Councilmember Moore has a question. Is the care team different from the designated crisis responders?
Yes, totally different. So DCRs, and that's the trouble with all these acronyms, designated crisis responders, that is a state, like kind of an HCA articulated position. We have really stringent involuntary treatment assessment policies. In fact, the most sort of stringent and conservative in the country. And so only a DCR basically can involve someone, can remand somebody to treatment. we have a huge challenge in King County because we have 30. Pierce County has expanded the interpretation of what a DCR is, so they have like 400. And so it's one of the causal factors to what we're seeing, that somebody's in crisis. We'll see someone who clearly is having some kind of psychotic episode or mental break or whatever, absolutely needs to be moved into some kind of treatment, some kind of facility for their own safety or the safety of the public. But we then have to try to get a DCR, on scene, and there's very few active in the whole county. So this is something that I know Chief Nelson worked on with our city council, but then he reminded, I said, well, what happened? Why didn't we just do what Pierce County did? And he said, because it's a county thing. I need the King County Council to do that, to make that change. So I do work closely with King County folks, and am advancing, the legislative adjustments we need. I try to talk about often. So yeah, it's a different thing. My first responders really are, you can think of them like Seattle's own mobile crisis team, the King County MCT. That's really what I've done. And I've told Michael Redding, I was like, would you prefer if he's the county chief crisis officer, would you prefer if Seattle just covered Seattle? He's like, yes, please. That'd be great. Because it's hard to cover a county, right, with a mobile crisis team.
So let's make this the last one. It's more of a comment. It's from Susan. First, I want to say that the 911 call takers are really helpful right now. Not too long ago, I'm thinking 2020, when I would call 911, I would more than likely have to talk with someone who is very rude or just not helpful. I'm wondering if how you are communicating to city residents that the 911 center has changed. Encouraging people to call 911 even when they may have had a bad experience with it before.
Yeah, I validate all of that. I mean, we had terrible staffing shortages, terrible morale. It was horrible to be in West Precinct in 2020. We're planning a community engagement tour, public safety, stressing again, this is how 911 works. We are staffed up. We are happy and helpful. Please just call 911, and then we'll divert. We'll let you know if it could be an online form, or if you need to go to 988, let us do that. So thank you for that. We do not receive calls yet from Find It, Fix It, but we should. San Francisco does that, and I'm working on that. That would be very good. And yeah.
Someone from MV Transportation, let us know if you ever need support. We run access services for Metro.
That is awesome. Yeah, yes, I do. I'm putting my email in the thing, and everyone email me.
And thank you, Captain Agard, for giving over a little of your time. We appreciate it. I do think we have to bring to closure, but it's been very interesting and lively. Thank you so much for your time. It appears you just are running.
I am. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
You have your own ways of de-stressing, given everything you're doing, and get some fun.
Yes, I do have my own strategy now. I just got engaged, and I am engaged to a man who is very acquainted with his work and is taking very good care of me, and is probably like cooking me a casserole right now. So thank you.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for making the time. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, now we are going to move on to the captain's update. And I am going to highlight the captain. And there you go. Captain Agard, you are on.
Okay, I need some of Amy's energy. I don't know how she does it. She was at our roll calls yesterday too, with all the officers. So she is moving and grooving. Okay, so for the crime stats, I'm just gonna do year to date tonight, because we're so early in the year that last 28 really doesn't capture what I want to report. So year to date for 2024 compared to last year, our overall crime, when looking at property and violent crime so far this year, is down 20%. Violent crime is up 15%, and property crime is down 23%. Looking at the uptick in the violent crime, we haven't had any homicides, but there was a 25% increase in aggravated assaults, which kind of bumped up the violent crime there. in the property crimes, everything is down, burglaries are down. The only category that's still up, and it's kind of been up for like the last couple of years, keeps going up, is the motor vehicle thefts. So that continues to rise, and that's citywide. That's not just in the north end. And then looking at shots fired is up over last year by 6. So we're watching that, and that is kind of a citywide thing as well. First, I want to address, I know the last time in the, someone asked a question, and I told them I would follow up on it. Over in Ballard at 900 Northwest Ballard Way, right in that area. They were asking what had happened. There was a call for someone in a car that was deceased. So I looked up that call, and what it was someone was in the area. They located their stolen car parked on the side of the street there, and they went up to the car and looked in the car and saw someone in the car that appeared to be deceased. So they called the police. Our homicide responded, medical, the ME responded as well, and preliminary, they believe that they died from CO2 inhalation. So I don't know if the person that wanted follow up on that is on the call or not, but wanted to make sure that I got back to them on that. Let's see, the couple of things that they wanted me to talk about tonight. The online reporting. I know that everyone's eagerly waiting for the online reporting system. I looked into that. It's still not ready to launch. There's been some issues with it, technology issues with it, but they're still hopeful that it will be soon. It keeps getting pushed out, but they're still working on it, and hopefully it will be out soon. And then follow up on the let's see, the burglaries in Loyal Heights. Wanted me to touch on that. I know Rudy had wanted some follow up on that. Looking at the ones that Soprano's Pizza, there was a burglary there on 1/19/24 where the front door window was smashed. Right now, there's no suspect info. It's assigned to our general investigations unit, but there's no suspect info on that right now. We did do follow up on that. Officer Cruzan and our crime prevention coordinator, Caitlin, went out to discuss and talk to the owner and do a security assessment on that. They also visited the nail shop next door that had concerns. And then Larson's Bakery at 80th and 24th was burglarized. That was back on Christmas. And we don't have any suspect information on that, but it's assigned to our general investigations unit. I know that there was talk about a neighborhood meeting for Loyal Heights at Soprano's Pizza, and maybe later, Rudy, you can talk to that. It doesn't sound like it ever launched, but let me know if that's ever a plan for the future. And then let's see, for the Ballard robberies, the student robberies in Ballard. I talked to the lieutenant in robbery today, and they do have the main one, not all of them, but they have identified the main one, and they're currently charging him. So they do have the main one that was involved in the kind of the instigator or the organizer of the student robberies in Ballard. Let's see, any questions?
There is one here in the chat. A couple of weeks ago, an RV on North 143rd and Fremont exploded and burned up in North Bitter Lake neighborhood. Witnesses said the occupant quickly left RV and truck before it exploded. Any info on specifics? Was it a drug lab on purpose? Was the occupant apprehended? That's North 143rd and Fremont.
Yeah. Officer Cruzan, did you do any follow-up on that?
No, I'm not familiar with that specific one. We've had a few here and there throughout the city. But yeah, if you're able to put the date in the chat here, I'll look into it and see what we learned from that incident.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Rudy, you have your hand up. You want to unmute yourself and ask your
Yes,
question?
I'll be real quick, Captain. Yeah, I want to include, I'm encouraged to bring up Fremont as well, from Fremont going up Leary, 24th, Crown Hill Fuel Station. We've got the hardware store on Crown Hill, and then you loop down Holman along the Greenwood corridor, as well as the Aurora corridor. And I honestly believe it's an organized group of people that are doing it. They know what they're doing. They're using a crowbar. They're going after certain items, and they're bailing. And we're just getting for a person that spas at Sopranos. He's got his head down like this, going, "I can't afford this." And you know, he's works very hard. They took the money to pay my helpers. You know, how am I supposed to recover that? And Susie wanted me to bring up in Fremont, as well as other businesses, that they're getting hit as well, and wanted to bring it to your attention. So anything we can do to be supportive of you and you be supportive of us. And I'd like to thank Officer Cruzan for his hard work in keeping us involved and a partner with the North Precinct. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Officer Cruzan has been awesome. Sorry, what?
I said, we're just getting shellacked.
Shellacked, yeah.
Not slacked, shellacked.
Shellacked.
Yeah, I'm trying to use my nice words, you know. I'm using my good words instead of my bad words.
Yeah. I mean, we've been working on the other side of the freeway as well. I don't know if anyone on the call is from like the Wedgwood area, but along 35th there, from like 65th to 110th, there's like residential and then businesses like automotive, a coin shop, you know, a car crashed into the coin shop, stole a bunch of stuff. It's all boarded up. We've been working with them as well. We're going to put our MP out there in the Safeway lot next week for a week to just have more presence out there. Rudy, I don't know if there's a place, you know, kind of around there. It has to be kind of a high visibility for the MP. I don't know if you've seen our MP, but it's very large. So we kind of have to find a safe spot for it that's high visibility. So, I mean, that's a possibility that we can do that in the future if you want to scout out some spots for it.
Thank you for that. I will. I'll check with the community. Let
Yeah,
them decide.
Yeah, we had it down in downtown Ballard for a while, and it was that worked out really well. And you know, the patrol keeps an eye on it, and they'll stop in as well. So it's a high visibility thing that a lot of people like to have, and I'm willing to work with anyone that wants it out when they're having issues like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wendy Sykes says in the chat that she can speak a bit to the crimes in Wendy, do you want to unmute yourself and give us an update?
Hi, I just want to introduce myself as well. My name is Wendy Sykes, and I work with Council Member Maritza Rivera, and I'm here representing our office. So just did want to introduce myself as well and say thank you so much for this opportunity to sit in and listen. I know we have our time scheduled with Captain Agard to talk to her about some of the crimes that have been ongoing along the 35th corridor. As she mentioned, at least I counted maybe 16 businesses that have had issues recently. And then we were just approached by a business owner on Sandpoint whose business had been broken into for like the 5th time in 6 months. And there's a string of similar break-ins to neighboring businesses along that way. And obviously U District is continuing to see crime and the worrying. I would love to have somebody speak to this if you could, just for my edification. The increase or seemingly increase in using cars as methods of breaking in, and what, if anything, can be done, mostly because the poor businesses, even if someone's not injured, the damage to the business is so much higher and more costly. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend that we're seeing all over the city. What they do is they steal a car. They're almost always, well, because they don't want to crash their own car, so they go steal someone's car, and then they target a business, crash into the front of the business, and create a huge amount of damage, probably more than they steal, because it can cost the owner of that business a lot of money to fix the damage. And then they run in and take whatever they're going to take. And then sometimes they've left the car there, and then they just have another car waiting, another stolen car, and then they load up and go in the second stolen car from the scene. So yeah, it's a real issue across the whole city. And most of the cars that they're using are Hyundais and Kias, because they're easy to steal. So it's a huge trend. And I've talked with the University District, down there, and some of the businesses are putting I don't know, the big concrete things in front of them. And that's a deterrent. But then there's also the aesthetics. They have to weigh the aesthetics of the ab there too. So it's really, do you put these big barriers up? But some of the businesses are putting up more barriers so they can't get through as much. So yeah, it's a big issue.
What other questions do we have for the captain tonight? Anyone else out there? Let's see. Scroll back here and make sure we didn't miss anything. It sounds like that's it for tonight. Oops, one more, just a second.
Saw something pop up there.
There's been organized crime along Greenwood Avenue for years. This group is growing. Vandalism to security of a number of buildings in a row. Drugs and street crime compounded by drug abuse and mental health issues on Greenwood.
On Greenwood, yeah. Yeah, I haven't read the data specifically for that recently. I know there's several encampments around there that I know I think we cleaned up 2 today. So sometimes when you get the encampments around there too, that can increase crime in the area, those kind of crimes that were just discussed. But yeah, if you're having let us know when there's speak up, like email me or Officer Kruzan if there's a trend going on, so we can get extra patrols out there. I mean, communicate with the precinct, because we get the overall crime data, and we need communication with you guys when there's a specific thing going on in an area. Feel free to email us and let us know.
Great. Susan Strength, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, just maybe an easy question. Since a lot of those crimes are dealing with stolen cars, is the SPD doing anything more, or any of those events where they're giving out those clubs for free? Are they doing any more of those events?
We just had another one, and I'll have to look and see. I know there's still some in the precinct. Our crime prevention coordinators are handling that, and I'll find out if they're going to do another giveaway. But I know they gave away a lot. So, and upcoming too, it's within, can't remember the date, but we're going to be getting, all the patrol cars are going to have what's called the ALPR. They're automated plate readers. So every police car is going to have this plate reader in the patrol car. So as they're moving along, the camera catches all the plates, parked cars driving down the street, and it runs the plates. And so officers are going to be able to identify any stolen car that's driving or parked or around them. So that's really we might get more than we can handle when we get the ALPR cars, because I foresee a lot of hits. So hopefully that will assist in the future as well in recovering these cars.
Okay, we have two more things. One is from Amy Smith saying, for the record, Captain Agard is one of my heroes. Thank you for the and great leadership.
Oh, thank you, Amy. I think you're my hero too. So yeah, no, she is just so refreshing and awesome to have on the police department. So I can't say enough good things about her.
Cool. Question for me. Are the readers that you just referenced, that's quite a change to put them on all the cars. Is that part of the technology package that was just approved?
Yeah, and with we have to, pass it with the surveillance ordinance as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Couple more questions now have popped up. Less on the security side, but more on the property damage. Is there any follow-up on the graffiti around Baker Park? I reported it to Find It, Fix It a month ago, but nothing happened. Who would?
Graffiti. Mike, you might know about that. I haven't heard, but Officer
Ask that
Kazan.
again. I was looking up researching that fire call. Could you repeat that
Oh.
question, please?
It's in the chat. Less on security side. Is there any follow-up on the graffiti around Baker Park? I reported to Find It, Fix It a month ago, but nothing happened. But of course we might hear from Megan shortly about the fact that now the city can enforce graffiti. So
Yeah.
she may have a little more to say about that. Is that probably true?
Yeah, I got that the pictures from that a couple weeks ago, and we reported to the Parks Department. They're responsible for taking that down. We didn't have any real leads or anything specific about that, so we couldn't follow up with any specific individuals or attributing it to anyone. But the important thing is to keep reporting in a timely manner, so that does get eliminated and removed right away, so it doesn't create that nuisance appearance that begets more graffiti, as we all know. So again, that was great. Yeah, we talked at the when we made sandwiches for the Fremont Rotary last month, and got some good relationships out of that, and we're communicating on that regularly. But please, yeah, let me know, Jess, if more things come up. Okay,
And
thanks.
Jessica has her hand up if you want to unmute yourself. You have a
Yes,
follow-up.
yes, I was the one who asked the question about the property damage. I mean, there's it's pretty constant, unfortunately. I mean, there's an area where people can do some barbecuing, and a trash can, and a disposal for charcoal, and the children's playground, the area that is surrounding that the park, also the fences of the properties next to it, they're all graffiti. And I've noticed sometimes that someone comes and tries to clean them up, but they just keep on getting tagged. And there's an abandoned property next to Baker Park that also attracts a lot of that kind of those kind of problems, because it's just abandoned and keeps on getting broken in and getting tagged. It's all tagged also. So I get the feeling that it's a that those kind of having the park graffiti is attracting bad crowds. And there was a time where we noticed that someone actually parked their car inside Baker Park that we reported as well, but the only way that we got a response was to report somebody reported a fire, right?
Somebody reported illegal fire, and then finally somebody shows up.
Yeah, but we reported it a lot to the police because somebody actually got their car inside Baker Park, and somebody else reported it as a fire, and that was the only way we got a response. But the fire department just came in, assessed that there was no illegal fire, and then left, and that was it.
Yeah, we've had a lot of challenges in that neighborhood over the last several years. It's greatly improved. Rudy will tell you that. He was pretty active in communicating the neighborhood concerns over the years there, specifically. Removal of the camp reducing the camp, I should say, by Safeway across the street's been helpful. I know we want to continue to address those camps and get the occupants into more suitable housing and better healthy arrangements. But again, we have to continue to keep the pressure on when we see these kind of smaller, quote unquote, problems in our communities, like the graffiti and things like that, so we don't let it grow into a bigger problem. It has improved. We always have room to grow and you know, improve the neighborhood appearances and the feeling of safety. But yeah, Jess, just keep reporting it. Reach out to me directly like you have been, and we'll address those little things too. But the vacant house, I'm aware of the vacant house too, and the DCI inspector is also aware, and we're working on the communication with the landlord to make sure he maintains security on that building and follows through on what the city requires for code compliance.
Hey, I just want to make sure the North Precinct community knows how fortunate you are to have two project officers, Officer Cruzan and Gordon. They're my only resource other than patrol to handle these kind of things. Other precincts don't have them. So we're super lucky to have these two officers, and I'm trying to keep them. So if you guys like them, make sure you yeah, because I'm really trying hard to keep them because they're super valuable.
Okay, a couple more here in the comments from Rick, just more of a comment, I think. With data on how many easy steal cars there are in the city limits, a cost estimate could be made for putting a tracker in each. That's interesting, especially since it would cross into privacy issues. But I mean, I think it's more of a comment than a question, probably. Garrett had a couple of questions, which I think he meant to send to you, but he sent to me directly. Who actually handles graffiti? It's multiple places, isn't it?
Yeah, we used to have one detective that handled graffiti only. You know, since it wasn't per se a crime anymore, unless it was there was a dollar amount like damaging. But that's going to change now that the Ninth Circuit shot that down.
Do you want me to step in on?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I was actually going to talk about this in my update, but you know, back in, I think it was June of last year, the U.S. District Court in the state of Washington, or the city of Seattle, declared the municipal code that made it illegal to commit an act of graffiti. They declared it unconstitutional and placed an injunction saying no one in the city could enforce that provision of the code. So SPD couldn't arrest anybody, they couldn't investigate the crimes, and my office couldn't prosecute those crimes. So we were in a holding pattern for those 6 months. In January, my office immediately appealed that ruling, saying we didn't agree with it whatsoever. And in January of this last year, for this present year, we finally were able to get before the court, and they heard oral arguments before the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit reversed the injunction and said, yes, the city absolutely has the police powers to go forth and to arrest and investigate graffiti crimes and obviously prosecute them. And so this was just this last Friday that the decision came out. So it's still kind of getting out. And I think there's going to be some more formal announcements about it to SPD and obviously to my office, how we're going to navigate that, because we have cases that are just sitting in the holding pattern where we haven't been able to do anything with them. And then to answer your question about the dedicated resources, there at one point was a dedicated detective in SPD who specialized solely in graffiti. As everyone knows, with the lack of resources, the defunding of the police department, and all of that kind of stuff, that position went away. There is a detective located out of Intel that is kind of taking it on as like a part-time side project, but really focusing on like the big name taggers, right? So the one-offs that you're seeing at your park probably aren't going to get that hard look from the detective, but when you go down the I-5 corridor and you see some of the common names like .com or Eager and things like that, that are all throughout the city, he's really focusing on working up some larger cases. And those cases probably would end up being felony level based on the level of damage that was occurred on the property. So while there is, someone at SPD that's taking a look at that stuff, the lower level stuff, unless an officer on views it happening, which is probably pretty rare these days, we're kind of left with not a whole lot that we can do other than reporting it and hoping that maybe we can eventually piece together some of these cases to make a larger case. And there also are, aside from, criminal prosecution, there are other routes you can take. SPU has a graffiti abatement program. I don't have all the details of it, but I could certainly get those to Katie to disseminate. But they basically have a team. Mayor's office works on it, and they go out and they abate the graffiti, right? They go in and they paint over it. They try to make the city not have that visual blight. So that's an avenue to take as well.
Cool.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we have a couple more things for the captain. Let's see, there's still one from Garrett sent to me, but it's for you. Have the new council members met with you to find out what SPD North Precinct needs most? And I would follow up with that is, do they meet with the individual captains or do they tend to meet with the chief? How does that work?
I have 2 meetings with 2 different councilmen, it's not councilmen, council people. For next week. So, and then one on Friday. So yeah, no, we do meet with them. I want to encourage communication because, we both have the same goals, community safety and taking care of the north end. So I'm all for two-way communication. So yes, we do meet.
Diane wants to express gratitude for SPD's arrest of the 13 and 15-year-old teens who ran down Aurora with the stolen vehicles.
Yep.
Pretty
Thank you. Yeah,
horrible.
that was really good. They caught those. I was surprised they were so young, but a lot of the ones getting arrested seem to be getting younger and younger.
Yeah. Nabi says, sorry if this question was addressed, but I was late. The 2 motels are reopened on Aurora. Is the SPD nuisance decree still in effect? What are the triggers if crime increases in the area? I am concerned that the human traffickers and their victims will return and the crime and violence. What is the city and SPD position on this?
I can take this one, Captain.
Yeah.
So Nabi, you're correct. Both of the motels reopened this past weekend. Just kind of the history there. Back in August of last year, they were both declared chronic nuisance properties by the police department because of the incredible amount of crime that was occurring at those properties. They were shut down immediately. Everyone had to leave the properties and they weren't allowed to run a business. We required them to go through various inspections. The Department of Health, which runs all of the transient accommodation licensing process, which is what those type of establishments have, did a very thorough inspection. They passed it. The Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection, which goes through, and looks to see, is your wiring correct? Is your plumbing correct? All of that kind of stuff, did a very thorough inspection and they passed it. We also had the fire department go in and do an inspection, which they eventually passed. And finally, the city's finance and administrative services, which does all of the licensing for different businesses, made sure they were up to date on their taxes and all of their business requirements. And after 6 months, they have finally come into compliance. And so they're allowed to reopen their business, but there is a catch. I'm sure some of you on this call remember the Everspring Motel down in the 8200 block of Aurora, which went through a similar process a couple of years ago. While they are allowed to reopen for a period of 2 years, they are under, it's called a correction agreement basically a contract between the police department and the motel owners, and they're required to abide by a lot of terms, everything from they have to keep the property looking aesthetically pleasing to probably the most onerous one, which is they have to have 24/7 licensed and bonded security on the property, with the thought being that that's obviously going to be a huge deterrent for people that want to conduct criminal behavior on the property. And so they have to do that for 2 years. There's a whole bunch of other terms that are in between those two extremes. And if any time they breach the agreement by not abiding by those terms, the case can then come to the city attorney's office and we can institute legal proceedings and sue them for breach of contract and have them be declared a nuisance property, and then whatever remedies stem from that. So there's really a lot riding on that. There's a lot at stake for that 2-year period. If they were to slip up, we had the motel owners into the precinct last week and had a conversation with them and made it very clear what the terms were and what we were expecting out of them. And also, I know Captain Agard will maybe speak to this or not, but SPD as a whole, as a organization, is very aware of what occurred at those motels, and no one wants it to get back to what it was. You know, the community doesn't, and SPD certainly doesn't. So, you know, all of the North Patrol officers that work the area are all aware of what's going on. All of the specialty units that, you know, might do their stings up and down the Aurora corridor are also all aware of what's going on. And they know that if they see, you know, anything, really anything, just report it to us, and we will have a conversation with the owners and see if it reaches to the level of taking further action. So this was the same methodology we used with the Everspring, and it was quite effective for those 2 years. We didn't really have any complaints or calls for service during that period. And then actually it's been almost a year since they've been allowed to operate their business without the oversight of the police department, and it's still pretty much been a pretty quiet place as far as Aurora motels go. So we're pretty hopeful that it's really going to, you know, it will continue. We won't see the human trafficking that we were seeing at those 2 establishments.
Yeah. Well said. Yes, we're watching them closely, and we'll be documenting it in police reports, so it's on record. So yeah, they're under the microscope for sure.
Great. Well, I think, let's see, a lot of thanks to you here in the comments. Councilmember Morris says she's looking forward to her meeting with you next week. Nabi appreciates your help. And let's see, I know we're over just a little bit. I think we have a little flexibility here. So,
well, Katie, those are graffiti and the motels were my 2 updates. So kind of snuck those in.
Casey, but he usually only needs a couple minutes, and I'm sure he'll give us some slack. So Rick says, are there other cities in the country dealing with the Kia problem differently than Seattle has? Note, parent found guilty of negligent homicide this week for not taking responsibility for their child. She's been in jail for 2 years for it, losing far more than privacy at this point. Well, this is a long thing. So
Rick, I can just tell you, I've talked about this at previous NorthPACs, but you know, my office, the city attorney's office, we did file a lawsuit against Hyundai and Kia for on the basis that they were negligent in not installing this anti-theft device on a certain type, certain make and models of those cars. Some of their cars have it, others of them don't. And that's really what's led to this problem, is the lack of this anti-theft device. And that lawsuit is proceeding. We've, you know, prevailed at every step of the way, but it's just going to take some time. You know, hopefully the remedy that we're hoping for is that the automakers will then be liable to obviously install these in their vehicles going forward, and then also to recoup the emergency costs to the city that we have, you know, we've incurred because we've had to deploy more police officers and prosecute more crimes and whatnot. So we are kind of taking that creative route to tackle that problem.
I think we'll make this our last before we go on to Casey. That Joan asks, is the graffiti gang related?
You know, I don't know for sure, but in what I have seen and what my office is looking at, it doesn't appear that there's any sort of nexus to gangs.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both very much. Interesting update.
Welcome.
And I think we will call on Casey here. Let me remove your spot and find Casey and spotlight him. Where are you? There you are, Casey. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. A couple of updates that relate to North Seattle. The case on Aurora, we're appreciative to the North Precinct officers, certainly, for their work on that over several months. And just today at the arraignment for the 13-year-old, based on the facts of what was sent to us from Seattle Police, we were able to amend that charge. It was assault with a deadly weapon, and it was moved to assault in the first degree, which is a more serious level of assault. So there's that 2 counts of assault in the first degree, and then other charges. And then there's a 15-year-old who is the alleged driver, who is also facing charges too. So we really appreciate the work that Seattle Police did on that. And along the same lines, one thing that our criminal division chiefs shared with folks at a meeting of the Seattle Police deputy chiefs and the captains and lieutenants and folks this morning was there's in addition to the routine calls and the emails that our criminal divisions, and in particular the juvenile division does with officers from across King County and deputies and troopers from across King County each day, they also set up a new, almost like office hours kind of, a time where law enforcement can call anytime that they have questions about a juvenile case. If they want a set of eyes on something and it's, you know, and it's breaking, or it's something that they're working on long term. If they have a question about an interview or a search warrant or how to interpret the laws that you know have changed in the last 5 years in our state, those calls are open to law enforcement to say, hey, we're here. And so far, just since mentioning this to law enforcement across King County a couple days ago, it's been really successful. There's an email that comes in so people can submit their questions ahead of time. In addition to just reaching out to our juvenile prosecutors one-on-one like they always do. But just having that time set aside, the folks in our juvenile division, Jamie Kivistad is the person who sent out the email yesterday and really realized the need here. The idea is to try to get people together and rather than having conversations in silos, trying to bring people together and collaborate. And sometimes, you know, I think she noticed that the same question was being answered to different departments or agencies. And so trying to get that information to people in one area that where everyone can benefit from it is helpful. Also, Jamie's working on a school safety summit that is an initiative that basically brings together police and school resource officers, the ones that are left where the districts haven't moved them out, those really helpful resources, and also administrators and teachers to identify the threats that they see. You know, it's really a question of odds. Anytime you put a large number of people together, the odds go up that you're going to have some kind of concern. And so making sure that those mandatory reporters are connected to the right people so we can avoid tragedies for everybody. She's also been really working hard on that. So those are some good news, some pieces of good news in the area of juvenile crime. And hopefully what we're going to do is keep track of how that goes, and we'll give you progress updates as it goes along. And, you know, hopefully the more communication, and not just to law enforcement, also to the community too, because, you know, trying to get teachers and parents and mentors involved too is important as a holistic approach, you know. But also when you see cases like what we saw near Aurora Avenue North, you know, those are clearly cases that need to go before the court right away. And we rush filed those cases because that's the appropriate thing to do. And in terms of car thefts, we'll have a juvenile crime data dashboard that's upcoming. In the next few weeks here, we'll roll that out. So we'll have more specific stats for you. But the gist of it is, you know, if you steal a Kia or a Hyundai or any type of car and you run that into a business, that's not a diversion case. If you pull a gun on somebody, that's not a diversion case. And so we just want to be, you know, very clear about that. And I think the more that people see that each one of these high profile cases that are in the news ends up before a judge, they realize that these are very serious offenses that have to go before the court. And, you know, hopefully people stop hurting others and themselves in the process. Let me check and see if there are questions here. There may be some. Does the prosecutor's office have a role with the Liquor Control Board regarding the recent issues around citations? No, we don't. That was completely separate from us, and some folks from our office brought that up to us, and you know, and what Lisa Mannion, as the King County prosecutor, did was reach out to the Seattle Police Department and also the mayor's office to say, hey, what's going on here? What happened here? What can you tell us about what's going on here? Because it was concerning, and she certainly wanted to be supportive to that community. And, you know, we know from people in our office that may be just a headline to a lot of folks, but they're, you know, people who are in that community are very concerned, understandably, and we want to be there to support them. Let me see what else is in the chat here. Kia has Casa City. That's a good question. What I've seen, Rick, what I've seen Kia say in just news stories that I've seen about it is they have said, you know, that they meet federal safety standards. The hard part is the federal safety standards aren't enough to stop the 500% increase of Kia thefts. And unfortunately, that's something that the federal safety standards aren't something that county or city prosecutors have an effect over. We're just stuck with the increase in car thefts that are really impactful to victims, and bringing those before the courts and trying to find a way to say, what the city of Seattle has done, hopefully will be very helpful, and Davidson's office, to just say, hey, you can't have a car that a 14-year-old can easily steal. That's a defect, even if it's not an issue with the federal safety standards. Let me see if there's any other questions that I'm missing. Also, shout it out, folks, if folks have other questions that I'm missing.
Jessica has her hand up. Jessica, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, actually, this is my name's Clark, so I wanted to put the camera on so you guys know, not Jessica and asking the question. I'm a resident here in Crown Hill. I've actually been here a couple of years. I met Rudy and he's put me through. That's why I'm here tonight. And I've been trying to figure out where to phrase my question in from all the different people I've heard speaking. Because I've seen system failures on all ends. I guess for the prosecution side, last year we had package theft like crazy running rampant in the area. I ended up putting GPS in a box and I actually had it stolen and tracked the person down. And then I was fortunate enough to have a police officer come by, so I was able to track them down, and then they proceeded. The case eventually went to the DA's office, and they contacted me and said, hey, would you be willing to testify? Because I guess we're gonna prosecute the case or whatever the case was. And then it stopped. I didn't hear much after that. So I'm like, I don't know what happens at that end. I also see failures from police calls. I make a call about drug related use at a bus stop, but then the call gets routed to King County. Anyways, I see failures all around as a resident. I'm just wondering, where do I fit in? Like, what do I do at this point? Like with prosecution, like, does it stop there? And so do I even worry about those kind of offenses? Right? Like I want to see change. But I want to know where I fit in too, because I don't want to just feel, okay, maybe that's not the right response. Maybe I have to do things differently. And, maybe I need to put pressure on the people doing the crime a different way and approach them. But I put myself in danger doing that. So I don't know. Anyways.
I like to take that one. What you said there at the end, make sure to keep yourself safe, because we see those situations go sideways very, very quickly. But, on the 911 part, even though that's separate from the prosecutor's office, the sheriff's office handles the transit patrols. So King County Metro and Sound Transit, that's why it got routed, even in Seattle or in incorporated city like Bellevue, would go to the sheriff's office, because anything bus related goes to them. In terms of, I'm not sure when you say the DA's office, if that went to the King County Prosecutor's office or to the city attorney's office. Most package thefts, depending on they really vary. So if those can be misdemeanor crimes, if the value is high enough, those can be felony crimes. If you go into somebody's house or into an, we most commonly see it in apartments where people break into an apartment by following somebody in. That's a burglary case, even if the property stolen is less than $750. And so if you have a case number, just drop it in the chat, or you can email me and I'll look up that exact case and I'll find out what happened to it.
Sure,
And,
and that's probably that's a failure on my part, because I didn't totally follow up to see where that was going. Right.
No,
so
no, you're busy.
I guess the other thing is with the rampant drug use. I don't know, is that even a thing that, like, I know it's going to be, is it being prosecuted? Is it something that it's, that's another thing that I see a lot of. And it's like, do I even bother to put in a call to get them to, if I get a response, does it go further after that? You know what I mean? Because I see, like, I don't know where in the system things stop and if it becomes it and when it doesn't.
No, it does. And it's still worth calling it in. And I think what SPD would say, not to speak for them, but I think what they would say is that, especially with the staffing models and knowing where to put patrols, is really essential to call those in, even if it's just a report to say, hey, I've noticed this. But in terms of the King County Prosecutor's Office, what we do is handle the drug dealers. In the last 2 weeks, there have been, really significant cases where, with the help of search warrants that we worked on with the sheriff's office and with SPD, there was, more than 70 pounds of meth and fentanyl that was taken off the streets. That's certainly not solving the problem overall. because there's so much of it. But what we're going to keep doing, and we have been doing consistently, is charging drug dealers, because fentanyl, is not the same as the weed that was in high schools, even 20 years ago. It's a way, I mean, it's so deadly. And and when you see people preying on people all across King County, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And those are very different types of cases. So we're going to keep charging those regulars. About 70% of the drug dealing cases that we get are either fentanyl or meth or both. In terms of individual drug use, that goes to the city attorney's office, and Megan can speak to that if she's around. But I know, we're also talking on the phone all the time at prosecutor's office and the city attorney's office to make sure that, particularly when we see the same dealers over and over preying on people, that we get those before a judge to say, hey, here's what we're seeing and how it's damaging communities and hurting people and killing people.
Thank you, Casey. And I think we are right at 8:30. We try to be respectful of everyone's time. We do have a few questions that are still in the chat that didn't get an answer tonight, but we will follow up. The North Precinct Advisory Council will follow up to get answers for those and bring them to next month's meeting. As a reminder, you can find a recording of this meeting. If you know someone who was not able to attend, we will post a recording. We also do minutes. Thank you to Leon. He does wonderful minutes. So within a few days, you'll find those out there. And so some more resources to follow up. So we thank you all for attending tonight. We'll follow up on more for next month. And I think we are going to call it a night. Thank you. If the board members would stay on, that would be great. Thanks very much. Good night. Okay, there we are. Oh, there's Case. Get him. There we go.
Can you turn off the recording?